I'm Rebecca, 35, and 2 weeks ago I buried both my parents after a tragic car accident on Route 26. Standing at their funeral, I never expected my sister Allison would choose that moment to corner me, demanding her inheritance while our parents' bodies weren't even in the ground. Growing up, she always got everything she wanted, but this time was different. The look on her face when the lawyer read our parents' will the next day is something I'll never forget. If you're watching this right now, let me know where you're from in the comments and hit subscribe. This story about family betrayal and unexpected justice might be exactly what you need to hear today. My childhood in Portland wasn't exactly a fairy tale, though from the outside we probably looked like the perfect American family. My father Thomas built his construction company from nothing, working 14-hour days to grow it into one of the most respected firms in Oregon. My mother Eleanor was a dedicated nurse at Providence Medical Center, often taking night shifts so she could be home when we returned from school. They provided us with a comfortable middle-class life in a 4-bedroom house with a large backyard where Dad built us a treehouse when I was 8. But beneath the surface of our family portrait lay a complicated dynamic between me and my older sister Allison. Even at 38, she still carries the same entitled attitude she had at 8. We couldn't have been more different growing up. While I was quiet and studious, preferring to spend weekends sketching buildings or helping Dad with his blueprints, Allison was loud, attention-seeking, and manipulative. She had this uncanny ability to make everything about her. "Mom, look at the drawing I made," I would say, holding up my carefully sketched house design. Before Mom could even respond, Allison would push in front of me. "That's nothing. Look at my painting." My art teacher says I'm the most talented student she's ever had. My drawing would be forgotten as Allison commanded everyone's attention. This pattern repeated throughout our childhood. When I won second place in the 7th grade science fair, Allison suddenly needed everyone to attend her drama rehearsal the same evening. When I was accepted into the National Honor Society, Allison announced she had been selected for a small role in a local commercial. My achievements always seemed to disappear in the shadow of hers. Dad tried his best to treat us equally, but I could tell he connected more with my interest in architecture and design. We would spend Saturday mornings poring over his construction plans, and he would patiently explain the principles of load-bearing walls and cantilevers. Those were the times I felt truly seen. "You have an eye for this, Becca," he would say, using his special nickname for me. "You notice details most people miss." Mom, always the peacekeeper, tried to balance her attention between us, but Allison demanded so much of it that I often felt overlooked. I remember overhearing a conversation between my parents when I was 14. "Thomas, we need to make sure Rebecca doesn't feel left out," Mom said. "Allison takes so much of our energy." "Eleanor, I'm worried about Allison," Dad replied. "Nothing is ever enough for her. But Rebecca, she's going to be just fine. She has a good head on her shoulders." When I decided to study architecture in college, Allison mocked my choice. "You'll never make real money designing buildings," she said dismissively. "I'm going to be famous. Everyone will know my name." Allison had set her sights on becoming an actress and convinced our parents to pay for her to attend an expensive performing arts school in Los Angeles. Meanwhile, I worked part-time jobs to supplement my scholarship at the state university. I didn't mind the work. It taught me the value of earning my own way. After graduation, I made the decision to move to Seattle. I needed space to establish my own identity away from Allison's overshadowing presence. The distance helped me gain perspective on our family dynamics, though the patterns continued whenever we came together for holidays or special occasions. Seattle. Allison had scoffed when I told her my plans. "Why would you move there? No one important lives in Seattle." What she never understood was that I wasn't trying to be important in the way she defined it. I wanted to create something meaningful, to contribute something of value to the world. That fundamental difference in our values would eventually become the fault line that split our relationship beyond repair. The 12 years I spent building my career in Seattle were transformative. I started at a small architectural firm, working long hours for modest pay, but the experience was invaluable. By my 5th year, I had worked my way up to senior architect, specializing in sustainable urban housing. By year 8, I was made junior partner, with my name added to the letterhead, Matthews, Johnson, and Taylor Architects. Despite my growing success, I maintained a relatively modest lifestyle. My apartment, while in a nice neighborhood near Lake Union, was small and practical. I drove a 10-year-old Subaru that was reliable but certainly not flashy. Most of my income went into savings and retirement accounts, a habit instilled by watching my father carefully manage his business finances. "Always prepare for the rainy day," he would say, "because it will come whether you're ready or not." I met my husband James at an architecture conference in Vancouver. He was presenting on innovative approaches to earthquake-resistant structures, and I was immediately drawn to his practical intelligence. Our first date was a walk through the city, pointing out interesting architectural details to each other. Probably the nerdiest first date in history, but perfect for us. James shared my values about money and success. We both believed in building security through hard work rather than quick gains or windfalls. When we married 3 years ago, we wrote our own vows, promising to build not just a marriage but a legacy of positive impact through our work. My passion project was designing affordable housing. I volunteered 20 hours a month with a nonprofit organization that created housing solutions for low-income families. The joy of seeing a single mother receive keys to a beautiful, safe home that she could actually afford brought me more satisfaction than any luxury purchase ever could. Allison's life in Los Angeles couldn't have been more different. Her acting career never quite took off despite her undeniable beauty and charm. She landed a few commercials and had bit parts in TV shows, but the stardom she craved remained elusive. Instead of adjusting her expectations, she doubled down, living as though she were already famous. Her Instagram showcased her luxury condo with ocean views, her Mercedes convertible, designer clothes, and exclusive parties. What it didn't show was the mountain of debt she was accumulating or the frequent calls to our parents asking for financial bailouts. "Your sister is struggling right now," Mom would tell me during our weekly phone calls. "The entertainment industry is very competitive." "Mom, she's been struggling for 15 years, I pointed out once. Maybe it's time she considered another career path. "You don't understand the artistic temperament, Rebecca," Mom replied, a rare edge in her voice. "Allison needs to follow her dream." What frustrated me most was that our parents continued to support Allison's impractical lifestyle while she made no effort to become financially independent. During one of my visits home, I discovered that they had paid off her credit card debt twice in the past year alone. "Dad, you and Mom need to think about your retirement," I said gently. "You can't keep supporting Allison indefinitely." He sighed, looking suddenly older than his 68 years. "Your mother and I have been discussing some changes," he admitted. "We have some decisions to make." That conversation happened just 3 months before the accident. It was the last meaningful talk I had with my father, and his words would take on new significance in the aftermath of their deaths. My visits home had become increasingly uncomfortable over the years. Allison would usually show up halfway through my stay, drawing all attention to herself and her latest, almost breakthrough role. She would make subtle digs about my boring career and practical lifestyle, while our parents tried to maintain peace. What Allison never seemed to grasp was that I wasn't jealous of her lifestyle, I pitied it. The constant striving for external validation, the emptiness that no amount of expensive possessions could fill. I had found purpose in my work and relationship, while Allison was still chasing the applause she'd been seeking since childhood. The call came at midnight on a Thursday. I was working late on a project deadline when my phone lit up with my father's number. Instead of his familiar voice, I heard a police officer explaining that my parents' car had been hit head-on by a drunk driver on their way home from their anniversary dinner. They died instantly, I was told, as if that somehow made it better. The next few hours passed in a blur of disbelief and raw pain. James handled the practical details, booking the earliest flight to Portland, calling my boss, packing my suitcase. I sat motionless on our bed, trying to comprehend a world without my parents in it. "They can't be gone," I kept repeating. "I just talked to Mom yesterday about Thanksgiving plans." By the time our plane landed in Portland the next morning, my body felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside me. James squeezed my hand as we pulled up to my childhood home, the sight of it simultaneously comforting and devastating. I wasn't prepared to see Allison's Mercedes already parked in the driveway. Inside, I found her in our parents' bedroom, rifling through Mom's jewelry box. "What are you doing?" I asked, my grief momentarily displaced by shock. Allison barely looked up. "I'm making sure everything's accounted for. Mom always said I could have her sapphire earrings." Her casual tone, as if our parents were simply away on vacation, struck me like a physical blow. There were no tears in her eyes, no sign of the devastation I was feeling. "They've been gone less than 24 hours, Allison." She rolled her eyes. "We have practical matters to deal with, Rebecca. Have you called Harold about the will yet?" Harold Stevens had been our parents' lawyer for decades. The fact that Allison's mind had already jumped to the will felt wrong on every level. "No, I haven't called Harold about the will," I said, my voice rising. "I've been a little busy processing the fact that our parents are dead." The next few days were a study in contrasting grief styles. While I moved through the house in a fog, looking at old family photos and crying over random items, Dad's reading glasses on his nightstand, Mom's half-finished crossword puzzle, Allison was frantically efficient, making calls and arrangements with an almost manic energy. When it came to planning the funeral, our different priorities became glaringly apparent. I wanted a meaningful service that would honor who our parents truly were, their values, their contributions to the community, their love for each other. Allison wanted everything to be elaborate and impressive, insisting on the most expensive caskets and arrangements. "They deserve the best," she said, though I couldn't help wondering if her conception of the best had more to do with appearances than with what Mom and Dad would have actually wanted. In my father's office, I found his journal while looking for insurance documents. Against my better judgment, I read the most recent entries. What I found stunned me. "Eleanor and I met with Harold today," he had written just 6 weeks before. "After much discussion, we've finalized the changes to our will. I worry about how Allison will react, but we cannot continue enabling behavior that has only led her deeper into trouble. Perhaps this will finally be the push she needs to stand on her own feet. Rebecca has never needed such interventions. She built her life on solid ground." I closed the journal, my heart racing. What changes had they made? And why hadn't they mentioned anything to me? As the funeral approached, Allison's hostility toward me intensified. She questioned every decision I made, from the choice of music to the selection of photos for the memorial display. When I suggested we include Dad's favorite Leonard Cohen song, she scoffed. "That's so depressing. People will think we didn't love them." The night before the funeral, I met with some of my parents' longtime friends for dinner. Margaret and Robert Jordan had been close to my parents for over 30 years, and their presence was comforting. "Your father was so proud of what you've accomplished, Rebecca," Margaret said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "He showed everyone at the golf club pictures of that affordable housing project you designed." This surprised me. "He did." Robert nodded. "All the time. Said you were using your talents to make a real difference." "What about Allison?" I asked, immediately feeling guilty for the question. The Jordans exchanged a look that spoke volumes. "Your parents loved both their daughters," Margaret said carefully, "but they worried about Allison's choices. Your mother confided in me that they'd recently had to refuse one of her requests for money. It was difficult for them, but they felt it was time for some tough love." This new perspective made me question everything I thought I knew about our family dynamics. Had I misread the situation all these years? The possibility that my parents had seen more clearly than I'd given them credit for brought both comfort and a new wave of grief for the conversations we would never have. The day of the funeral dawned with appropriate Pacific Northwest gloom, a light drizzle falling from steel-gray skies. The First Presbyterian Church, where my parents had been members for over 40 years, was filled to capacity. Dad's construction employees occupied several rows, while nurses from Mom's hospital filled another section. Their reach in the community was evidenced by the diverse crowd, from bank executives who had financed Dad's projects to former patients Mom had cared for. James sat beside me in the front row, his steady presence anchoring me as I prepared to deliver the eulogy. Allison sat on my other side, impeccably dressed in a designer black suit that seemed more appropriate for a fashion show than a funeral. She had spent the morning taking phone calls and texting, barely acknowledging the visitors who came to offer condolences. When it was my turn to speak, I approached the podium with trembling legs. Looking out at the sea of faces, many tear-streaked, all attentive, I found my voice. Thomas and Eleanor Taylor built their lives on a foundation of integrity, hard work, and genuine care for others. I began. My father could have cut corners in his construction business to maximize profits, but he never did. My mother could have chosen a more lucrative medical specialty, but she felt called to bedside nursing, where she could provide comfort during people's most vulnerable moments. I shared stories about Dad teaching neighborhood kids how to use tools safely, about Mom organizing food drives for families in need, about their 68-year-old bodies still volunteering to build houses with Habitat for Humanity. They believed that true wealth wasn't measured by your bank account, but by the positive impact you had on others, I concluded, my voice breaking. Their greatest legacy isn't in buildings or medical records, but in the values they instilled in everyone they touched. When Allison took her turn, her remarks were brief and strangely impersonal. She mentioned our parents' generosity several times and spoke about their success in material terms, but shared no specific memories or insights into who they were as people. It felt like she was eulogizing strangers. The reception at our family home afterward was catered by an expensive service Allison had insisted on. As I moved through rooms filled with mourners sharing stories about my parents, I began to notice a pattern. Person after person approached me with similar messages: how proud my parents had been of my work, how they had spoken of my values aligning with theirs, how they had respected my independence. Mrs. Hoffman, my mother's best friend, pulled me aside near the fireplace. "Your mother told me something interesting last month," she said quietly. She mentioned that they had finally stopped Allison's allowance. Allowance? I repeated, confused. Allison is 38 years old. Mrs. Hoffman nodded gravely. Exactly why they stopped it. Eleanor said Thomas put his foot down after Allison asked for money to buy a vacation home in Palm Springs while still owing on her condo. They realized they weren't helping her by continuing to fund her lifestyle. This conversation was interrupted by a commotion from the dining room. I found Allison directing two of her friends to wrap up Mom's antique silver service. "What are you doing?" I asked, keeping my voice low to avoid creating a scene. "Taking what's mine," she replied with a dismissive wave. "Mom always intended for me to have the silver. You can have the china." "We haven't even discussed dividing their belongings yet," I said, feeling my composure slipping. "Nothing should leave this house until we've had the official reading of the will." Allison's face flushed. "Why wait? We both know how this works. Everything gets split 50-50. Several nearby conversations quieted as people became aware of our tension. Allison seemed to notice the audience and suddenly raised her voice. "Actually, I should get more than half," she announced loudly. "I'm the oldest, and I've had significantly more expenses than my sister with her simple little life. Mom and Dad would want me to maintain my standard of living." I was stunned into silence by her audacity. Before I could respond, she continued, her voice growing even louder. "Where's Harold anyway? I want my inheritance now. These funeral delays are ridiculous. I have financial obligations that can't wait for all this unnecessary ceremony." The room fell completely silent. Dozens of eyes darted between us, witnessing this uncomfortable moment. My face burned with embarrassment and anger. "Allison," I said quietly, "this isn't the time or place." "It's exactly the time," she shot back. "Everyone here knows that you manipulated Mom and Dad in their final years, always playing the perfect daughter while I was pursuing my dreams in LA. You probably convinced them to change their will in your favor." The accusation hit me like a slap. I hadn't known about any changes to the will until finding Dad's journal, and even then, I had no idea what those changes entailed. Just as I feared the situation would escalate further, Harold Stevens stepped forward from the crowd. In his 70s now, he had the commanding presence that came from decades in courtrooms. "Allison, Rebecca," he said firmly, "your parents were dear friends as well as clients. Let's honor their memory by handling this with the dignity they deserve. I've scheduled the formal reading of the will for tomorrow morning at 10 at my office. All questions about the estate will be addressed then." Allison opened her mouth to protest, but something in Harold's expression made her reconsider. With a dramatic huff, she stormed out of the room, leaving an uncomfortable silence in her wake. Margaret Jordan approached and put her arm around my shoulders. "Your parents would be so proud of how you're handling this," she whispered. "Don't let her get to you." But as the reception continued, I couldn't shake the knot of dread in my stomach. Tomorrow's will reading suddenly loomed as a pivotal moment in our already fractured sisterhood. Harold Stevens' law office occupied the top floor of a historic building in downtown Portland. The conference room where we gathered the next morning featured large windows overlooking the Willamette River and walls adorned with black and white photographs documenting the city's growth over the decades. I recognized several of my father's construction projects among them. Family photos also had a place of honor. Harold with my parents at their 25th anniversary celebration, at the grand opening of Dad's company headquarters, at a charity gala where Mom had been honored for her volunteer work. These images underscored what I already knew. Harold wasn't just our parents' lawyer. He was their trusted friend. Allison arrived 15 minutes late, making a grand entrance in oversized sunglasses and another expensive outfit. She was accompanied by a young man she introduced as my personal attorney, Justin. Harold raised an eyebrow but welcomed them both professionally. "I wasn't aware you felt the need for additional legal representation, Allison, but of course, Mr. Justin is welcome to observe." "It's just Justin," the young man corrected, looking uncomfortable. We settled around the conference table, me and James on one side, Allison and her lawyer on the other, with Harold at the head. The mahogany surface gleamed under the recessed lighting, a box of tissues placed discreetly in the center. "Before we begin," Harold said, his voice gentle but authoritative, "I want to express again my deepest condolences. Thomas and Eleanor were extraordinary people. I was privileged to know them for over 40 years, and to help them plan for the future of their family and assets." He opened a leather portfolio and put on his reading glasses. "The will I'm about to read was updated and signed 6 weeks ago. Thomas and Eleanor came to me together, clear-minded and determined about the changes they wanted to make." I felt Allison tense across the table. The change had been recent, just as Dad's journal had indicated. "I'll begin with the standard legal provisions," Harold continued, proceeding to read through the formal introduction and executor appointments. I was named executor, with Harold as the alternate, information that made Allison shift uncomfortably in her seat. As Harold moved into the distribution of assets, Allison leaned forward, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Her confidence was palpable, as if she were certain of a favorable outcome despite the recent changes. "The family home and its contents," Harold read, "are to be sold, with proceeds added to the estate for distribution according to the terms outlined below." Allison frowned at this. I suspected she had been planning to claim the house for herself. "Thomas and Eleanor's estate," Harold continued, "including life insurance proceeds, investment accounts, retirement funds, and the value of Thomas Taylor Construction Company, is calculated at approximately $12 million. I gasped. I had no idea my parents had accumulated such wealth. They had lived relatively modestly, reinvesting in Dad's business and being careful with their spending. "The distribution of this estate," Harold said, his voice taking on a more deliberate tone, "will proceed as follows." He looked directly at Allison and me before continuing. "Having given careful consideration to our daughter's different life choices, financial habits, and demonstrated responsibility, we have determined that an equal division would not be in either daughter's best interest." Allison's smug expression faltered. I felt a tightening in my chest. "For our daughter Rebecca," Harold read, We establish a trust fund in the amount of $8 million. $4 million is to be released immediately for her use as she sees fit. The remaining $4 million will be held in trust, with annual distributions of investment proceeds. Rebecca has demonstrated financial responsibility throughout her adult life, and we trust her judgment in managing these assets. The room seemed to tilt. $8 million? I couldn't process the figure. James reached for my hand under the table. For our daughter Allison, Harold continued, his tone unchanged, we establish a structured trust in the amount of $4 million. This trust will be managed by First Portland Trust Bank, with monthly distributions of $5,000 for living expenses. Additional funds may be released for qualifying expenses such as medical needs, education, or career development, subject to trustee approval. The color drained from Allison's face. That's it, she interrupted. $5,000 a month? That won't even cover my mortgage. Harold continued, as if she hadn't spoken. This structure has been thoughtfully designed to provide long-term security for Allison while encouraging financial responsibility. We have observed with concern her pattern of spending beyond her means and accumulating debt despite our frequent financial assistance. This is outrageous, Allison exclaimed, slamming her hand on the table. They can't do this to me. They can and they did, Harold replied calmly. The will is legally sound. Rebecca manipulated them into this, Allison accused, pointing at me. She turned them against me in their final years. I shook my head, still trying to absorb everything. I had no idea, Allison. I didn't know about any of this. Harold cleared his throat. There's more, he said. A personal letter from your parents explaining their decisions. He removed an envelope from his portfolio and began to read. To our beloved daughters, these decisions were not made lightly or without deep consideration. We love you both equally, but we recognize that you have different needs and challenges. Allison, we worry that our continuous financial support has prevented you from developing the skills and resilience needed for true independence. This structured trust is our attempt to provide security while encouraging growth. Rebecca, we've watched with pride as you built your career and life on solid principles. We have one request regarding your inheritance, that you continue your work with affordable housing, which we believe creates lasting positive impact. Harold paused before delivering the final revelation, which brings me to the last item. For the past 5 years, Thomas and Eleanor have been anonymously funding Rebecca's affordable housing projects through the Taylor Family Foundation, with an additional $2 million set aside specifically for this purpose. This was the most shocking news of all. They were the anonymous donors? I whispered. The nonprofit had received substantial funding from an unnamed family foundation, enabling us to complete projects that would have otherwise been impossible. I had never suspected my own parents. They were immensely proud of your work, Harold confirmed. They didn't tell you because they wanted the projects to succeed on their own merits, not because of family connection. Allison had gone completely still, her face ashen. Then suddenly she exploded. This is unbelievable. They gave her $10 million and me a pittance with strings attached? I'm calling a real lawyer. I'll contest this. I'll tell everyone how she manipulated them. Her attorney looked uncomfortable. Miss Taylor, contesting the will might not be. Shut up, Justin, she snapped. You're fired. I need someone who will actually fight for me. She stood up, gathering her things with jerky movements. This isn't over, Rebecca. Not by a long shot. You think you've won, but you have no idea what I'm capable of. With that threat hanging in the air, she stormed out, leaving her bewildered attorney to apologize before following her. In the silence that followed, I turned to Harold. I had no idea, I said again, about any of it. The money, the foundation, their concerns about Allison. Harold nodded sympathetically. They wanted to protect both of you in the ways each of you needed. For Allison, protection from herself. For you, the resources to expand work that matters. As we left the office, the weight of both the inheritance and Allison's fury settled on my shoulders. I had a feeling this was just the beginning of a difficult journey. The days following the will reading took on a surreal quality. While I met with financial advisors to discuss managing the unexpected wealth and explored how to best honor my parents' wishes for the affordable housing projects, Allison launched what could only be described as a campaign of revenge. It began with calls from family friends and distant relatives asking strange questions. Is it true you convinced your parents to cut Allison off? My cousin Amanda asked when she called. She said you told them lies about her spending habits. That's absolutely not true, I responded, shocked. I had no idea they had changed their will until Harold read it. Similar conversations repeated with increasing frequency. Allison was systematically contacting everyone in our parent circle, spinning a narrative of manipulation and betrayal, with me cast as the villain. A week after the funeral, Margaret Jordan called, her voice tight with concern. Rebecca, I wanted you to know that Allison has been telling people that you prevented her from seeing your parents in their final months. Several people at church were discussing it yesterday. My stomach twisted. That's completely false. Mom and Dad visited Allison in LA just 2 months ago. I have photos they sent me from the trip. I thought as much, Margaret sighed. Don't worry, Robert and I set the record straight. But you should know what she's doing. The situation escalated when I received a certified letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. Allison had hired Gregory Palmer, an aggressive attorney known for contentious estate battles. The letter stated their intention to contest the will on grounds of undue influence and diminished capacity. When I called Harold to discuss this development, he wasn't surprised. It's a standard tactic, he explained, but it has no merit. Your parents were of completely sound mind, and we have extensive documentation of the discussions leading to their estate decisions, including video recordings of our meetings where they explicitly stated their concerns about Allison's financial habits. Video recordings? I asked. Your father insisted on it, Harold said. He anticipated Allison might challenge the will and wanted to ensure their wishes would be protected. Even knowing her case was weak didn't make the situation less stressful. Each day seemed to bring a new attack. Allison created a private Facebook group for family and friends where she shared selective text messages and emails out of context, attempting to paint me as manipulative and money-hungry. The most disturbing discovery came when James and I were organizing my parents' home office. In a folder labeled Allison Finances, we found documentation of just how extensive their support had been. Over the past 15 years, they had given her more than $2 million beyond her regular allowance, paying off credit card debt, covering rent when she overspent, even putting down payments on both her cars. Most shocking was a series of loan applications with my father's signature as guarantor. Allison had leveraged their good credit for personal loans she had never repaid. Based on the collection notices filed neatly in the folder, many of these loans were in default. No wonder they restructured her inheritance, James said quietly. They were trying to protect her from herself. My phone rang while we were still processing this discovery. It was a number I didn't recognize. Is this Rebecca Taylor? A woman's voice asked when I answered. Yes, it is. This is Natalie from Westside Reality. I'm calling because someone named Allison Taylor is trying to list your parents' home for sale. She claims to be the owner, but our background check shows the property is still in Thomas and Eleanor Taylor's names, now part of their estate. I closed my eyes, fighting a wave of exhaustion. Thank you for calling. Allison is my sister, but she has no authority to sell the house. I'm the executor of the estate. The harassment continued to escalate. Allison began showing up at my workplace in Seattle, causing scenes in the reception area and demanding to speak with me. She left threatening voicemails at all hours of the night. You think you're so perfect with your precious inheritance. One message slurred, clearly recorded when she had been drinking. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did. I'll tell all your fancy architect friends how you stole from your own sister. The breaking point came 3 weeks after the funeral. James and I had returned to Seattle, trying to resume some semblance of normal life while dealing with the estate from a distance. At 2 a.m, our security system alerted us to someone attempting to enter through the back door. The police arrived to find Allison trying to jimmy the lock with a credit card. She was intoxicated and carrying a backpack containing printouts of my parents' will, a kitchen knife from their house, and oddly, several framed family photos. When questioned about her intentions, she claimed she was just trying to retrieve family heirlooms that rightfully belonged to her. The responding officers, noting her impaired state and the knife, took her into custody. I declined to press charges, instead requesting a psychiatric evaluation. The hospital held her for 72 hours, diagnosing her with alcohol abuse disorder and recommending treatment. Instead of accepting help, Allison viewed this as another betrayal. Upon release, she escalated her threatening behavior to the point where James and I felt unsafe in our own home. Security camera footage showed her driving by our house repeatedly, sometimes parking across the street for hours. With a heavy heart, I filed for a restraining order against my own sister. The court granted it based on the evidence of harassment and the attempted break-in. Sitting in that courtroom, watching Allison glare at me with pure hatred, I mourned not just my parents, but the sister I had once hoped to reconcile with someday. "This proves it," she spat as she left the courtroom. "You never loved me. None of you ever did." Her words haunted me, not because they were true, but because I realized Allison truly believed them. Somewhere along the way, her perception of reality had become so distorted that she couldn't recognize genuine love or concern. The restraining order wasn't just protecting me from her. In a way, it was protecting her from the consequences of her own destructive behavior. 6 months after my parents' funeral, the raw edges of grief had begun to soften into something more manageable. The legal battles with Allison had concluded more quickly than expected. Faced with the video evidence of our parents clearly stating their concerns and wishes, her attorney had advised her to drop the case. I hadn't heard from her directly since the restraining order was issued, though I occasionally received reports from mutual acquaintances. She had sold her condo and moved to a smaller apartment, apparently adjusting to the reality of her monthly allowance from the trust. Some said she had started attending auditions again after a long hiatus. Others mentioned seeing her at a recovery meeting, though I didn't know if that was true or wishful thinking on my part. With the $4 million of immediately accessible inheritance, James and I had made some careful decisions. We remained in our same home but established a scholarship fund in my parents' names at the nursing school where my mother had trained. We also created the Thomas Taylor Apprenticeship Program, providing construction training for disadvantaged youth. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Harold called with an unexpected development. "Rebecca, I found something while doing the final review of your parents' papers. It's a letter addressed to both you and Allison, with instructions that it be given to you 6 months after their passing." He arranged to meet me in Portland the following weekend to deliver it. The letter was in a sealed envelope with both our names written in my father's distinctive handwriting. Although I was technically within my rights as executor to open it alone, it felt wrong not to at least try to include Allison. After consulting with Harold, I sent a formal letter through her trustee, explaining about the document and offering to meet in a neutral location with a mediator present. To my surprise, she agreed. We met in a private room at Harold's office building. Allison looked different, thinner, less polished, but somehow more present. We sat across from each other, a professional mediator between us, with Harold observing from the corner. "Thank you for coming," I said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. Allison nodded stiffly. "I'm only here for the letter." I placed the sealed envelope on the table between us. "It's addressed to both of us. I thought we should open it together." With the mediator's encouragement, we agreed that she would read it aloud to avoid any disputes about its contents. Allison carefully opened the envelope and handed the pages to the mediator, who began to read. "Our dearest Rebecca and Allison, if you're reading this, we have been gone for 6 months. We hope that time has brought some healing, though we know the path of grief is neither straight nor predictable. We want to explain more fully the decisions we made regarding our estate. These choices came after years of observation, concern, and love for both of you. Allison, from the time you were a small child, you had a brilliant light that captivated everyone around you. Your creativity, your passion, your ability to command attention, these are extraordinary gifts. But we watched with increasing worry as you came to believe that your worth was tied to external validation and material possessions. Each time we rescued you financially, we unwittingly reinforced the idea that you didn't need to be responsible for your choices. The structured inheritance we left you isn't a punishment. It's an expression of our belief in your capacity to grow. We hope that by now, you may have begun to discover your own resilience and capability. You are so much stronger than you know. Rebecca, your quiet determination and sense of purpose have always inspired us. We sometimes fear we didn't tell you often enough how proud we were of the woman you've become. Your decision to use your architectural talents to help those in need resonated deeply with our own values. Our anonymous support of your projects was our way of partnering with you without overshadowing your accomplishments. To both our daughters, we hope that by now, you have found a way to begin healing your relationship. The competition and distance between you has been one of our life's greatest sorrows. You are each other's only siblings, the only two people who share the exact same heritage and family memories. Whatever happens with the material inheritance, please remember that our true legacy is in the values we tried to instill: integrity, compassion, responsibility, and love. Money can be spent, possessions can be lost, but character endures. With eternal love, Mom and Dad. When the mediator finished reading, the room fell silent. I was fighting back tears, hearing my parents' voices so clearly in their words. Across the table, Allison sat very still, looking down at her hands. "They really believed in you," I said softly. "They always did." Allison looked up, her eyes glistening. "But they were right about me. I was irresponsible. I did think I was entitled to their support." It was the first acknowledgement I'd ever heard from her that she recognized her own patterns. "I've been so angry," she continued. "At them, at you, but mostly at myself. I wasted so many years trying to become famous instead of doing something meaningful." We didn't magically reconcile that day. The damage between us was too deep for a single conversation to repair. But it was a beginning. We agreed to meet monthly with the mediator to work through our issues gradually. In the year that followed, I threw myself into expanding the affordable housing initiative that had meant so much to my parents. Using the foundation they had established, we broke ground on a major project: 50 units of beautiful, sustainable housing for low-income families in Portland's historic Albina neighborhood, where my father had grown up. At the groundbreaking ceremony, I was shocked to see Allison in the small crowd. She stood at the back, uncertain, but she had come. After the formal speeches, she approached me hesitantly. "This is really amazing," she said, gesturing at the architectural renderings displayed on easels. "I can see why they were so proud of you." "Thank you for coming," I replied. "It would mean a lot to them." She nodded, looking around at the community members gathered to celebrate the project. "I've been thinking about what I could do with my life. I've started volunteering at a children's theater program, using my acting background to help kids build confidence. It's not much, but it's a start," I said, "and it's meaningful." The relationship with my sister remains a work in progress. There are still difficult moments and old patterns that emerge, but we're trying, and that effort itself honors our parents' final wish for us. The inheritance changed my life, but not in the ways I might have expected. The money provided resources to expand work I already cared about, but the real inheritance was the clarity it gave me about my parents' values and their vision for both their daughters. They saw us clearly, our strengths and our weaknesses, and loved us enough to make difficult decisions. Perhaps the most important lesson I've learned through this journey is that family legacies aren't primarily about money or possessions. They're about the values that shape us, the examples set for us, and the wisdom shared with us. My parents left me wealthy in all the ways that truly matter. So I ask you, what kind of legacy are you creating in your own life? Is it aligned with your deepest values? And what would you want your loved ones to inherit, not just materially, but spiritually and emotionally? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Your support means the world to me as I continue sharing these difficult but transformative family stories. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the most valuable inheritances aren't the ones we can hold in our hands.